Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Um, I want to talk about this whole thing with Trump and Israel and Iran in a different way today. Um, you know, I have different perspectives about things because some things they're good for my comedy or whatever I do in terms of jokes, which I enjoy making jokes and making fun of shit. So, like, there's that element. And then there's the spiritual element, which is the most important. What's God's plan? Which God's plan is almost never something that people want to have happen. Like people are against God's plan. I mean, everybody is against some part of their soul's path, and then overall God's plan for everything and everybody, and then the personal stuff. Because if people were aligned with the divine plan, there would be no problems. There'd be no drama. There'd be no any of this kind of stuff, right? And so when you understand that God has a plan, then you have to submit yourself to that plan, and nobody wants to do that. Like Jesus, Father, why I hath thou forsaken me? That's a rejection of God's plan. Like you just screwed me over. Why are you fucking me over, God? Like and then you can and who wouldn't say that if they were tacked up to a cross after the humiliation and betrayal that he suffered from everybody around him? Like he got completely rolled by all his disciples, most of them, three of them, and then all these other people. I mean, at best, people are running for the hills. Like, they're not like, hey, we'll go down and with you. They're all running, all his disciples. And why wouldn't they? And they all end up suffering horrible deaths themselves. And so, if that's your plan, God, then what the fuck? You look at all the scumbags and the criminals and the bad people that were around Jesus at that time, like the Roman Empire and the religious Pharisees, the Jewish Pharisee, money counters, using their temple for financial transactions and shit that Jesus turns over the money tables, like those things, like all the people that and Pontius Pilate and these people were crucified. Like there's people who within the Roman government would crucify people, like, all kinds of people. Like, think about what a sick fuck that would be. Like, what if people were crucifying people right now in the American government? Like, what if you did petty little shit and you walk through, if someone did something really petty, you walk through the center of town and there's somebody being crucified. There's, 10 people. It's crucifixion day. I mean, that's how they fucking dealt with people, right? Like, that's not fucking, I mean, all the people that were in charge of that shit. And the people cheering it on, like the people, the crowds spitting on Jesus and, crucify him, right? I mean, that's according to the official story. And, Jesus like, look at these motherfuckers. Why are you crucifying me, right? God. And so, like, but there's reasons for it. Like, there's reasons for all of it. And it's not what the Catholic or Christian tradition teaches you, but there's always a reason for something. Like, it always makes sense on a spiritual level. Anything that you endure. But it's unpleasant. You don't want, no one wants to face up to what they owe or what they, all these things, right? So on a spiritual level, there's something else going on here. Like God's work is being done because the system has to come down, and Trump is helping out with that, right? In a way, he's doing God's work for whatever, that is. And then there's just, all of the yes people and the taint lickers that surround him and all that stuff. But and I thought about this differently. I liked how unpresidential Trump was. Because in the first term, everyone's on the left, all the media and all the political people, all the Joe Biden people, all the Democratic lawmakers, Chuck Schumer's and Nancy Pelosi's and all these people, and all the media were upset that Trump didn't act presidential. Like, everybody knows the president's a lying piece of shit, right? That the politicians are lying pieces of shit, but they act presidential. They don't tweet in the middle of the night. They don't, like, do shit. They don't get petty. They don't, say certain like things that Trump did, like the little bratty little punk ass things that he said. And I loved that he was saying it because I knew the presidency is a joke. These people aren't like the best of the best, right? So, I liked that, right? Because it was bringing truth to the, like, this guy could be fucking president. And, he's more authentic, even though who he is authentically is horrible. And that even made it funnier. Like, I loved it. Like, for the first 3.5 months until he got totally worked and played by COVID. Because I knew the system's coming down anyway. So why not have a Trump? Like, Trump was at least different. He was my favorite president for 3.5 months as a character because of all those things. But I knew he was a horrible person too, right? But it's funny. It is a level of truth. It was exposing that the presidency and the government really don't fucking matter, and they're not like, it isn't what they pretend it to be. Some hoity-toity, something that to be revered. It's not reverable. It's scumbags making scumbag deals. And he just took it to another level. And so in that, let's get going with this thing here. I want to preface what I'm going to say here as we go through this.
Happening now, new details emerging after top national security officials briefed House lawmakers on those U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Despite President Trump's repeated claims that Iran's nuclear program was, quote, obliterated, both Republicans and Democrats are now saying that Iran still possesses a stockpile of enriched uranium. Let's take you live to Capitol Hill with CNN's Lauren Fox. Lauren, what more are lawmakers saying?
Yeah, behind closed doors, Republicans and Democrats both told me that this was a professional briefing, that they were able to ask a series of questions, and that there really weren't the kind of political fireworks that you might see after the kind of drama and frustration that has unfolded in the previous days in the reaction to the fact that this had been postponed for so long. But there are a number of folks who are saying now that the goal of this was never to completely destroy all of the material, and you have some lawmakers acknowledging the fact that there may still be a lot of uranium left in Iran. Here's a collection of what lawmakers said after this briefing.
Okay, so this is bad news for Trump because he used the word obliterated. And somewhere in here, because I was listening to this in the background yesterday, I think I was taking a bath, maybe, I'm not sure where it was. But then this guy said something that I've been saying. It's the use of the word obliterated, which is going to screw him over. I'll comment on that when the guy says it. But this is a bigger issue about the state of humanity. Because, there's just this idea that we get to bomb fucking Iran anytime because our master's Israel. These people all fucking get money from Israel, all these politicians, are, hell-bent on making sure that Israel is protected. And Iran isn't going to just make a nuclear bomb and drop it on Israel. But what would happen is, if Iran is a nuclear country, you can't treat it the same way. Every country that has a nuclear weapon, and we saw this with Gaddafi. Gaddafi gave up all of his weapons of mass destruction. He was, being a good member state in the United Nations, even though he criticized the United Nations over what happened on 9/11, and he criticized the United Nations there's these two epic speeches he gave, or maybe it's one speech, and he criticized the United Nations. It's supposed to be something that's for peace, and there's been 60 some odd wars that have happened under the United Nations, watch. And, the peacekeepers are often abusive and commit war crimes, and these big corporations go in and, get paid a lot of money to rebuild the country, and they take advantage of the country and grab the resources. And the United Nations then ordered him some years later, even though he was about to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, that he they ordered a regime change. And he was, a great leader by every standard. His country was doing great by every standard, every measurable standard, by the UN's own standards, right? And they say, fuck this guy. And it taught anybody a lesson that when you try to capitulate to these people, but then he went and did the gold dinar, which is similar to, the Iranians selling their oil to China through the, rail system, right? All those things. But Iran is an oil-rich country with a lot of resources, natural resources, and a lot of like history and these other things. And the hatred of Israel that they have, Israel really can't compete with them, other than and Israel can't compete with any of these countries because Israel's so small in terms of its population, in terms of its, it's like smaller than like Rhode Island, these countries that are, there's like, 2 million people, 2 million Israelis there. And so, other than having Jewish people in other countries who are wealthy and have, good positions of power and influence, particularly in America, and the American lobby, they can't survive in that region in any way, shape, or form. Iran is a huge country with 10 times the population, with a lot more natural resources. And so if they become a nuclear power and, they end up having no sanctions and they can trade their oil and their other resources, they're just going to eclipse Israel and be this giant, massive, global power with a massive army, and they can develop more and more technology. They're already doing things with drones, and they have the alliances with Russia and China, and so they are a real threat to Israel in that way. And so Israel's aware of this, and there's a hatred there. So that's why America bombed them, and then whatever other reasons, and America fucked them with the Operation Ajax. So America, we, as a country, screwed that country over, which has caused the shitty leadership they have now and all that other stuff, right? The regime change always ends up backfiring in one way or another. When another country imposes their will and puts in a puppet government, it never lasts, and it always has, huge implications of suffering for that country, right? And so there's no legitimate reason for us to bomb Iran other than just like, all right, fuck you guys. You guys have a shitty government because we fucked you over 60 years ago, and now we got to fuck you over again, right? And there's no moral argument or ethical argument for bombing Iran. And they weren't, actively working to get an atomic bomb. Like they've always been 2 weeks away, according to that, that thing I showed you, that meme, in a number of my recent videos. Israel's always saying they're just 2 weeks away. And so in that, this happened. And the lawmakers here, who are partially owned by Israel, but also anti-Trump, even the Republicans are waiting for when Trump goes away. Like all the mainstream politicians, because they know that Trump is just a fucking disaster. And that he's their disaster, right? And so they're, and so all of that comes down to one word, which was obliterated.
We don't know, or at least I don't know, the presence of where the highly processed uranium may be. It's clearly the facilities that put all this together are destroyed, or it will take them years to recover.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think the president's overstating it when he says totally obliterated?
No, I think he's accurate. Now, does that mean that people can sit down and try to rebuild facilities? We don't know what Iran will do. But I think they set them back years.
It's the enrichment capabilities that were taken out. There is an enriched uranium in the facilities that moves around, but that was not the intent or the mission.
Do you think are you concerned about where that uranium might be?
My understanding is most of it's still there.
Obliterated is a very total word. So perhaps with further
how's she not dead yet?
information, we'll know more. We do know in the public domain that the enriched uranium is still there, and that was never part of the goal.
Now, there were several House lawmakers, especially Democrats, who made clear to me that they still believe that a lot of intelligence is still to come. Obviously, this is a slow process to gather information on the ground, understand the full destruction, understand the full scope of what happened here. But that is certainly still in play, and lawmakers are going to continue to expect.
I had to stop for a second there. Let's get back to it here. This guy's coming up here, I think, that I want to play. This one clip.
Expect to be briefed up here on Capitol Hill.
Lauren Fox, thank you so much for the update. Brianna?
Let's talk about this more now with pollster and communication strategist Frank Luntz. Pardon me. You were
You thinking about lunch, Brianna? Brianna needs lunch. Somebody give Brianna some fucking lunch, for Christ's sakes. Brianna's angry.
message guru, and so I really want to ask this question of you. This word, this focus on obliterated, how are people receiving it, and did the president maybe step in it by using that word in making it something that is maybe harder to sell with all of this debate around this word?
It's a mistake, and what I don't understand is why they didn't clarify, is Iran stronger or weaker today than it was 7 days ago? Is Iran more or less capable of threatening its neighbors, threatening the U.S.? On all these key questions, the Trump administration was successful, and I want to articulate.
It's not successful, which is a whole different thing, because it wasn't justified. It's a war crime. And, you know, one of my things here, and like I said, God's work is God's work. God's plan is God's plan. And whatever happens, you have to accept it as, you know, leading our responses to maybe past mistakes, some scars, things that have to be dealt with because of human error, you know, human freedom of choice. And so that's all that stuff. But, you know, I talked about Joe Biden taking America out of Afghanistan, which had to happen. And he got stuck with, you know, some of the things he voted for as a senator and things that he contributed to as a vice president. Those bullshit wars that didn't need to happen, and that war, the bogus war in Afghanistan that didn't need to happen, that led to the poppy fields being grown, you know, the opium grown as the Taliban was taken down, and the opioid epidemic that hurt so many Americans. So, you know, Joe Biden was a part of all that. But taking the military out of Afghanistan, which was there for like 20 years. And Trump didn't do it because no one wanted to get stuck with that disaster. No one wanted, it was like admitting failure, which America doesn't do. I mean, that's why the Vietnam War went on too long, right? Because it was it was a failure. America doesn't fail. And nobody wants to be the guy that failed. And so Biden took the fucking hit for that. And it was a disaster, right? Because it was going to be a disaster. They left behind equipment, all that shit. And he tried to change the story, and it was effective because the media was ignoring the fact that he was senile. And they, they changed this. They came up with this thing called ISIS-K, which is some bullshit thing, and started droning people, and they droned 7 kids. And that was fucked up, right? These are the fucked up things that are particularly egregious that I end up seeing and pointing out, because no one talks about that. There's 16 military guys who died, you know, but he droned fucking kids. He said, we're going to switch to drone warfare. We don't need the troops there anymore. And so, you know, but they emboldened the Taliban, and it was an American failure. Let's go back to what this guy was saying here. And so all these people are fine with the bombing, even though that he did it illegally. It's a war crime. Let's go back to this. You know, like it's a bad thing. Like, you know, and you think America doesn't have fucking karma and some scars, and, you know, doesn't have, God isn't watching, and we can get away with the fucking hurting everybody else and eating their resources? You think that's going to last forever, right? You know, so here, this is what this guy was saying.
Was 7 days ago. Is Iran more or less capable of threatening its neighbors, threatening the U.S.? On all these key questions, the Trump administration was successful, and I want to articulate this very clearly. This was a successful mission until you set the bar at obliterate, which is it's very hard to say, and it's very hard to actually do.
See, the problem with Trump and this thing, you know, and all of his fucking cronies, his acolytes, his fucking cult followers that just agree with him, is he has to fucking make things bigger and better. And he never tells you the truth because it's always got to be framed in how great he is. And this goes far beyond, what he's done as a politician. This is what he would do on The Apprentice. And whenever he was interviewed, Trump was the best. Like Trump Towers, Trump things. And he knows the guy has deep insecurities, whatever it is, right? Like he's somebody who knows he's a fraud. Like he knows that he's a bullshit artist. And, he knows that he can't deliver on substance. And, people who don't have a fully developed internal world, and he's superficial, and he's just one of these fucking guys that, who he knows almost nothing about all these subjects, and he thinks he's an expert at everything because of the narcissism and the whatever. We have all the best people, and I'm the best guy, and we did the greatest thing, and then he announces these things. This is the greatest success in military history, this bombing or whatever. And then he, hides behind this pilots, but he's talking about himself. And so Trump trying to make this bigger and better than it before, plus Trump doesn't like problems. And Israel and Iran is a fucking problem. And so, and he wants to be the guy that solved the relationship. Oh, I brought peace to Iran and Israel. And so he's like, all right, the bombs obliterated everything. Now Israel, you calm the fuck down, and you guys can stop whining about Iran's nuclear program. And now I took care of it. And big man, and president of a big country, and we'll go take care of it. I obliterated it. It's got to be obliterated. Now it's just everyone just agree to have peace, and let's put this behind us. And I just ended this. I dealt with China and Pakistan, and I'm putting out fires everywhere. We're going to bring peace to Russia. None of these things would have happened with, if I was president, these kind of things, right? And, he wants to just have the thing over with. But it's fucking not over with, right? And America is going to be dragged into this fucking bullshit because Israel wants fucking more than this thing with the nuclear weapons. They want to cripple Iran's potential. Ultimately, they want to be the big power in the Middle East, and they don't have it. They don't have the oil. They don't have the people. They don't have the people power, the oil, energy power, the money power. All they have is America, and they're tired of fucking, this kind of kiss America's ass or whatever, or manipulate America, whatever you want to say, and, be beholden to some country that may or may not have the power in a few years to help Israel, right? Or may have somebody who gets elected that's like, fuck Israel, right? Like that's totally within capabilities. There could be somebody who would run with this idea that we're going to cut off Israel of all our financial aid. Like we're done with Israel. Like just with Trump, these presidents, as much as they buy all of them, at what point is the anti-Israeli sentiment in the young people? Like all these people grow up with Palestine and the way they were treated as a trauma and a wrong that's got to be righted. And as those young people have become these tech billionaires and, start to have an influence over the government, or America just folds. So they're in this time crunch, right? So it's all of those things, like I said, Trump's doing God's work. That's one level of this thing. It's entertaining. It's good comedy for me. And that's another level of this thing. But the real problem here is Trump doesn't fucking learn and grow as a person. He doesn't change. He doesn't say, all right, this doesn't work. Like, this is his ultimate bad example for all these fucking dumb fuck Trumpers and the young people that are now gravitating to all these angry young men, all these people, that you can't say shit like obliterated. And something I used to find hilarious, him saying shit like that, knowing it's not true and provoking the shit out of the media and the left. But now it's not funny because, it's fucking other people over. It means more suffering for the people of Iran. And again, God's work that America has to come down. I know America has to collapse. I know America has to fucking, and how that affects all of us is another issue. But just, based in God's will and righteousness and what's fair, America has to, die. Like, it just does. Like, it's, America that we now know is not going to exist in a couple of years or whatever, 10 years, because it's just not right. Like, what we're doing is wrong. And it's too resource heavy. Everybody fucking knows it, right? On some level, that it's not, we're going in the wrong direction. It's taking people in the wrong direction further and further away from the divinity within them, further and further away from all these things. And the real issue here is Trump doesn't learn from his mistakes. Trump doesn't change. Trump doesn't grow as a person, as a president. He never takes accountability or responsibility. And he has all these yes people around him, including, media and Fox Media that create this emperor has no clothes type moments. And they all are saying it was okay for him to use the word obliterate. Like, I mean, who gives a shit at this point? Like, it's Trump being Trump and whatever. But it's important because Trump has to admit he's wrong like every fucking buddy else. And not do all this fucking exhaustive response to try to justify him saying obliterate. Like he said, tweeting in the middle of the night about this. I would solve the problem, ceasefire, everyone's saying I've handled it. I'm put into arrest and try to make everybody, including Iran and Israel and everybody else, knuckle under to Trump's bullshit. And that, now there's backlash and he's calling CNN evil. These are evil people for calling me out on my use of the word obliterate. When he himself has said that 2 days afterwards, these preliminary intelligence reports were not valid and they were evil, and why are people leaking them, and why are people, undermining me and saying these things when we don't know. When you didn't know anything when it happened. Like, you couldn't use the word obliterate. But you used it, and then you kept on doubling down on it when there was no evidence to support your claims. And then you tried to hide behind the fucking pilots and saying how sad they were for the criticism. When you've done this, you've created this adversarial relationship with the media, which I think is funny, and I like, but it's wrong, and it's on, it's as much on you as them, even more so on you, and he never learns. And so that's just as your leader, as the guy who's viewed as the leader of the world in some ways, in America certainly, you display such immaturity and narcissism and fucking the inability to take responsibility for a mistake, and what the efforts he'll go to cover up that mistake, because even here he's admitting it. Let me show you this. So then Trump was asked about this.
If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you, would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely.
And have you had any conversations?
Turned out to be unbelievable.
Sir, are you concerned?
Turns out to be unbelievable. Now, he's admitting that obliterate was, he's admitting without admitting that there's a possibility they didn't obliterate everything. Because they did. Now they're saying that the goal was never to get rid of all the enriched uranium. I mean, the reality of the thing is, Israel has a huge influence on the media and politicians. And this is as much as they're doing. Like, he wants to blame, he's calling CNN and all these people evil. And they're, of course, trying to undermine Trump's credibility because they all are, there's personal stuff. But on a deeper level, in a power structure level, Israel doesn't want this idea that Iran is now fucking been denuded and we can just leave them alone and have peace with them. Because this has never been about them having a nuclear bomb. It's about Israel dominating that region. They have ambitions. And that ambition is to use America in a way that America shouldn't want to be used. And so, they've been doing this for years. And so, they're pushing for him to bomb them again because that's what they want. So when he talks about evil, he's not talking about the CNN, but he doesn't even know who's fucking him over here, right? Because Israel was not happy with him saying obliterated. It goes against their interests. And, they have all these proxy wars they're fighting with the media that they own, right? And the influence.
All about secret nuclear sites in Iran. You talked about maybe just
secret nuclear site?
Yes, that there might be some.
Not really. Can I tell you, they're exhausted, and Israel's exhausted too.
So saying they're exhausted, what Trump is trying to do here is something that would be good. Like, he just wants this thing to be over with, this fucking beef. And, but he's not going to... nobody can solve this problem because people involved are not honest. Iran has a dishonest, shitty government that the people don't want. And it's a theocracy of the worst kind, created by America fucking over that country years and years ago. and nobody wants to tell the truth about. Like, this is complex, right? Like, you think about your personal relationships and people who've hurt you, your parents or your, significant others, your siblings or people, that, you've been wounded by someone, and you might think about it, but like, it's there at family gatherings or whatever it is, right? People have been, feel some kind of resentment and whatever. Like, everyone's got their fucking story, right? And, the pain that you suffer at the hands of other people, especially family members or people that were supposed to love you, or, things that were just, wrong. And you bury it and you move on and you whatever, you seal it up. But the wounds are there, right? The fucking stuff's there. And, this stuff's gone on for 3,000 years with this battle between Jews and Muslims. And, they've got this beef. And, there's just no, it's something that's obsessive for some people. There's an obsession with it that they were, willing to, where people just focus on victim consciousness and anger and hatred and blame, and they just, they don't think about their loved ones as much as they think about the people that they hate. That's the problem with hatred. It's so powerful that people can't focus on what's important, and they just they dive into this abyss of hatred, and that's why division is such a wonderful tool for the people that control the world, right? And so, Trump is trying to bring this thing to an end, but he's unrealistic about it. And, he's saying things here.
Can I tell you, they're exhausted. And Israel's exhausted too.
Are they? See, that's not true. And, and he believes it because, he won't believe that they're not going to, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's, whatever it is, right? And yeah, and you're not going to come in there and change this.
And I dealt with both of them. And they both wanted it settled, both of them. And we did a great job, but they're exhausted. The last thing they're thinking about right now is nuclear.
Trump calls people lightweights, but he's a lightweight intellectually and in terms of the depth of his persona. But for him to say they both want this settled, now, I don't know whether he really believes that or not, but I think he at least wants to believe that. But it's clear that Israel doesn't want things settled, right? Israel is doing everything in its power to stop any kind of peace process, and two-state solutions way off the table in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. They don't want that settled, right? They've influenced these other countries. They're sabotaging these other countries around them, Syria, and they went in and just unilaterally started bombing Iran with no real provocation or reason. They can say that Iran's been fighting proxy wars, but they just wiped out those various groups that they say are being run by Iran in their borders areas. In fact, that's what one expert said was the reason they went, because they didn't have the threat of all these missiles pouring in from their border, because they were able to go do that after October 7th. They were able to go ballistic. And, they're always the aggressor there. And they don't want this settled. Why do they all want it settled when you had to call back their fucking bombers? You had to write a tweet of Israel, bring back your fucking bombers right now. I'm fucking pissed. When they started bombing Iran for no reason. And, they don't want it settled. It's clear they don't want it settled. And, there's nothing from anything that they've said or done that would indicate they want to stop fucking up Iran, right? And they want America to be in there with them. And so, if that's what you're saying, then you're either lying on the behest of Israel or you're fucking delusional, or a little bit of both. The thing about this is, this is where Trump's inability to be, he's got almost like a 3-year-old, like a toddler, in his emotional response to these things. His simplistic, putting square blocks in square holes kind of level of, compartmentalizing these things. The Arabs are very upset by both what America has done to their, whatever it is, Iraq and Afghanistan and, these various countries, Libya and all this stuff. The people there, they're not happy with the way America has waged these wars and all this stuff, right? there's people in power with money and billionaires and things, and that give Trump planes and stuff like this, and they're happy about this system, and they have their own issues with their people, very angry people. They're having a dispute between the Sunni and the Shiite, all that shit that they have, right? But what Israel's doing to Palestine and all these other countries, there's people there that are very angry, and there are 2 billion of them, Muslims, and there's 16 million worldwide Jewish people. So there's this stuff that's going on that's pissing people off. And it's pissing people off in America as well. And it's not fair. And Israel is emboldened now. Like I said, they're on the clock, and they really want to get this done the next 2 years before Trump gets deballed by the Democrats winning the House and the Senate, and him, retreating into his last 2 years of whatever he's going to do. Whatever he's going to do there. We'll see what he does. But, him simplifying this thing like they're tired and exhausted, they just want peace. They don't want fucking peace, right? Neither one wants peace, right? They just want, Iran knows that they're in a weakened position, and Israel wants to, push as far as they can push, and even beyond that, and they know they can push this guy, and so this isn't done.
You know what they're thinking of? They're thinking about tomorrow, trying to live. It's such a mess. It's such a mess. The place was bombed to hell, and no, I'm not worried about it at all.
If the intelligence,
I'm not worried about it all. And so, but he's admitted here that, yeah, they do have nuclear materials. Like, he's conceded this, so obliterated is off the table. But he's not going to walk back obliterated. And so this is where this whole thing's fucked, right? And like I said, the biggest problem here is him not demonstrating a willingness to change and grow as a person, and realize when things aren't working for him, and call things evil when people have their own perspective, which is a right perspective in various ways. So that's, it's a big deal. Like, that's a big deal when you're a leader. And of course, none of these other guys really did it. They faked it. But at least faking it, you're showing people an example of, all right, I fucked up. I'm going to take responsibility for my fuck up. Because he did fuck up by tweeting obliterated. But he's going to do the same thing tomorrow. He's going to broadcast his success and, blame everything else on Biden. And he's going to keep on doing that and never change. He doesn't have the ability to change. In fact, he just gets worse. And that's a real problem. Because he's just out there displaying this. It's not even like his handlers are trying to hide it. They're using it as a way to embolden his support from, like, his supporters love this bullshit. Not admitting you're wrong when you're wrong. Not admitting to a mistake. That shows weakness, like when you do that. Not willing to change and grow as a person. And it's why America's it's the downfall of America. There's times where you have to give things up and admit that you're fucking, you're going in the wrong fucking direction. And, like, people just don't do it. And that's why, I don't give a shit about any of this stuff, because I have zero faith in America and people changing, embracing their higher nature, because all the evidence I've seen to the contrary is to the contrary, that people won't do it. Like, people have higher nature in them, they have God in them, but they refuse to embrace it. And even if they flirt with it for a little bit, their lower nature, their egos, is so controlled over their system that they, and it feels threatened by the divine path and your soul's path and all these things. And so people will not embrace their higher nature. And so if humanity gets wiped out, it won't surprise me, like, at all. I mean, it won't become as a shocker. Like, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, right? Because the evidence is overwhelming that people can change but just refuse to do so. All right, so I haven't watched this yet. I don't know if it's any interest, but well.
Nuclear facility today, days after it was heavily bombed by the United States. Some appear to show excavators at tunnel entrances and other machinery. As we're waiting on more assessments of the damage done to the facilities, President Trump today said he would absolutely consider bombing Iranian nuclear sites again if he thought it necessary. He made those comments as members of Congress received a classified briefing about the U.S. strikes on Iran.
See, he's got all these yes people. Look, he always has people on either side. Where did we see that before? The Apprentice, right? he always had these two cronies on either side of him, and oftentimes a woman on this side and a man on the other. But it's classic Apprentice. These are supposed to be successful people. Donnie Deutsch used to be sometimes on there. Now he hates Trump. He used to be on something where he hated Trump, like Morning Joe. But, he has these people on either side that are his yes people, and they tell, the same story, and they back what he's saying. So Trump will get out of the way for these people to tell everybody what a great guy Trump is, right? Like it happened with Pete Hegseth the other day, where Trump will get out of the way, and Pete Hegseth says, you guys are just doing everything to attack this great man, this kind of bullshit.
Ron, CNN spoke to several members after the briefing.
It's been severely damaged. Yeah,
we saw this thing already. Let's listen to this guy for a sec.
That matter here. There is the capabilities and there's the intention. Both.
All right, so we get this thing. That, this is all about him saying obliterate and not walking it back. And they know he won't walk it back, so they know the more that they press into him, the more he will, turn the thing around, right? So this is to go with that a little bit.
Donald Trump's mega bill is sputtering amid public backlash to its giveaways to the super rich. Now Republicans scrambling to save it from GOP defections, with a vote possibly happening this weekend. The New York Times calling the bill more regressive than any major law in decades. Massive tax breaks to the wealthy, while around 15 million people would stand to lose their health care. Acclaimed New York...
Which is going to happen anyway. This is a disastrous bill, and I read, what it was. It's, it's not written by Trump. It's this whatever it is, these Republican think tanks that have written this, whatever. The people that did Agenda 2025. And ChatGPT's description of it, this woman put the whole bill into ChatGPT, and it spit out this whole thing here. But this is about Bezos.
Writer Evan Osnos is here with us. He's been writing about inequality for a long time. The real world backlash to exorbitant wealth on display in Venice right now, where the $50 million wedding of Jeff Bezos is sparking protests. This banner reads, if you can't rent Venice, or if you can rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more taxes. The super rich arriving in style on their mega yachts, like Bezos' own $500 million yacht. It's longer than a football field. Other yachts...
Holy shit. He's got a yacht that's longer than a football field.
Also arriving. These owned by an Amazon investor and the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's what's happening overseas. Here in the U.S., though, Americans opposing Trump's bill and its giveaways to the rich by 21 points. Joining me, Evan Osnos, writer with The New Yorker. His book, The Haves and Have-Yachts, dispatches on the ultra-rich.
All right, we get the idea here. And I don't know how much people are aware awake and how much this is going to stop it. But it's the greed that always gets you, right? That's from Wall Street. It's the greed. Like that movie, Wall Street. It's the greed. It's the greed that... there's just, and these people aren't happy. And these are Trump's people. And, it's the wanting to squeeze more out of the fucking masses, where they have less and you have more. And, now, of course, with AI and robots and things, like this is where they no longer you don't have less leverage as a non-person in the elite category. You have less and less leverage. They want to get rid of the people who have $1 million and $2 million or whatever they are, in terms of income. People make, not $1 million a year, not make $50 million a year, but make, $1 million a year, make, $500,000 a year, $300,000, $400,000. The upper middle class. It's like they're trying to squeeze everything out of it. And then get everybody, they can do it with these young people. They just have to figure out what to do with the people who are, think of America in a certain way. Because young people you can slap them you can put them in a small fucking apartment where they, mostly spend time on the internet. And then they can walk to fucking the grocery store, they don't care about driving in these 15-minute cities. Young people will totally accept that, right? The majority of them. They don't give a shit about owning a house and mowing the lawn and doing the things and having neighbors and, whatever. They just want these, the little apartments. They're isolated, this whole COVID thing, where they have most of their contact online. They can work online if they even have a job, then be monitored by AI and live these, sheltered little existences. But ultimately, they can depopulate the shit out of the world, and it won't affect their whole, their lifestyle. But that's not going to happen. Like they're going to, divinity catches up with everybody. I want to wrap this up here. But basically what this video is about, and it's really important, and I should cover this more, and I talk about this quite a bit, and it's why, my channel suffers or whatever it is because people don't want to change. And leaders and everybody who has got a platform or everybody who's talking about this, everyone wants to talk about how Trump has to change or Biden has to change or the Republicans have to change or the mainstream media has to change or, the truthers, whatever it is. There's always, look at these people, they suck. They wish they should change. I think these guys should change. But nobody wants to change. And that's the bottom line. That you have to adapt to something new. Like, whatever we had going on here is running out. That's the idea of pockets of the future. And that there's going to be something else in the future. In terms of lifestyle, in terms of your orientation to the world. Everything you've been taught is bullshit and a demonic system, a debt-based system that's upside down and goes against the divine order, the divine plan. And we've gone in the wrong fucking direction, which we can all see the results from. And it needs to stop. And the longer you go in the wrong direction, the more painful it's going to be, because to get back on the righteous path is a longer, tougher journey. It's like you're going away from your soul's path. And you're fucking burning down bridges and, creating enemies, pissing people off. Like you're doing things all along the way. And then you got to walk back through all this fucking wreckage that you've done and take responsibility for all the bullshit you've pulled. That's what's happened. Like everybody who's not living a good spiritual life, and that's pretty much everybody, is going in the wrong direction. And then to get back to just the starting point so you can start your spiritual journey. You got all this fucking, bad shit you've done, all this fucking, things you got to fix and responsibility you have to take and pain you have to endure because you've done all this stuff, right? Pleasure-based stuff that you push the pain back away from, hurting various things, people, whatever it is, doing damage. And now you got to walk back on this path just to get to the starting point of your spiritual journey. And it's fucking sucks for everybody. Like taking accountability for all the fucking wrongs you've done and dealing with those things and paying the price you have to pay to then live the life you should have lived. And these people are all horrible examples. That's why I'm so hard on them in a way. I'm not, but people would think that. Because I'm like, you're going in the wrong fucking direction. And there's nothing, I'm doing every one of these people a solid if they'd listen to me, which they won't. They don't listen to me, and they wouldn't listen to me, even if they were hearing what I was saying. And everybody else that listens here, that you're going in the wrong fucking direction. And it's going to suck worse for you the longer you keep on going in the wrong direction. You're eventually going to have to walk back through this in future lives and, all these other things, walk back through the rubble of all these people you've hurt on the way and all this shit that you have to deal with, all the obstacles you've created. And then you can start your spiritual journey. And that in itself is, there's problems with that, right? There's some kind of bug crawling on the light switch. I'm looking at it. It's searching. It's going around the... there's a light switch right in front of me. And, about 10 feet away, and there's a little, I think it's an ant, but it might be a spider. Anyways, it's just crawling around trying to figure out what the fuck it is and where it's going. And, that's a probably good metaphor. So anyways, that's what's got to happen, changing. And people don't want to hear that shit, and that's, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a fly. It just flew around. It's some kind of flying insect, probably a small fly. Anyways, just in case you were, the suspense is over. only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse. And the Ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.